Hey guys, thanks for joining me on another episode of Jack's Mechanics. A little bit of a different one today. Not in the workshop, but just going to talk about a repair that we just got done on this BT50 / Ford Ranger. It's a 6R80 trans is particularly what we're focusing on, and it is for a fault code P0720 and P0722. May also be some engine codes, like invalid data from TCM, etc. But they're the two P7s are in the TCM and relating to speed sensor malfunction and speed sensor no signal. There's a bit of a common issue. First things first, here we've got what is called the lead frame. I'll just stand up. So basically this is inside the gearbox, bolted into the valve body assembly, and then obviously the valve body is bolted into the case. So we've got the speed sensor on the underside here, and this is the culprit sensor. You're probably going to ask me what's the actual issue. I don't know. The speed sensor ends up giving no output, and this is the replacement. It's basically just a plastic wiring harness, and goes onto all the solenoids on the gearbox and the multi-connector there for the outside of the gearbox. So I'm hopefully just going to be able to give you a rundown of how to replace this part. Here we have a part number. Not sure if this part number is a Ford or a Mazda part number. Either way, they are the same. They are the same part. The one that I pulled off did have a different part number. I don't believe there's any updated parts. So first things first, once you pulled the bottom of the gearbox pan off and the filter off, you're going to be left with this valve body. This is what you're going to be seeing looking upwards, and basically the bolt A and A here are your main bolts for your valve to hold the valve body into the case, and your bolts C also hold the valve body into the case. Bolts B are what hold the lead frame into the valve body. So you just sort of want to, once you've got your pan off, your first step would be to disconnect your connector, basically just by pushing the little tag in and pulling it down, and then you want to basically work this out of the gearbox, and you can pull this whole piece out. You can replace this if you want, if your seals are crushed or if it was leaking prior. Definitely a good idea. They're only like $20. They are replaceable with a ZF one. It's actually a ZF made gearbox, foundations, but Ford basically bought the rights to it and had to change a few things, and I believe this lead frame is one of those things that were changed. So once you've got the tag up like this, you're basically pulling it away from its locks around here. You just sort of want to pry here on the gearbox and pry this out. Once that's out of the way, that's all good. Obviously, prior to this, you need to flick your multi-harness connector up and pull the wiring harness out of there. We can get rid of that. And next step, we want to drop out the valve body. So would be probably wise to start off with these C ones. You can see up the top here, T30. T30, yeah, these are all T30s. So take these out because they're not really doing too much. The main weight is obviously in the valve body, and then just sort of go with your A's. And obviously once you take your last A out, this thing is going to fall down. So you want to make sure that you obviously don't drop it. One thing to take note, you have the manual lever here, and that lever needs to locate in the selector and into this part on the lead frame as well, which is this part right here. So this slides back and forth. It's a bit sticky. I think there's a magnet behind there, hence why we've got material stuck onto there. Magnet behind here, if we have a look, must be some sort of sensor to tell it that it's being pushed into manual mode or something like that. I do not know that side of things, but either way, when you basically pull this out and you're replacing this, I've got my fingers dirty. When you're putting it back in, you need to make sure that this is located in this part of the selector, the manual selector, and also this part goes in at the same time. So there is two bits, one part here and one part here, locating into that rod, and that rod moves freely when you take the valve body out. So that is a very important step not to forget. So we've gotten our valve body out at this point, and then we want to go take out B's, 6 B's. Says T25 here, they're actually T27, and at that point we have our long dowels. You just get a little screwdriver and crack it off and basically work the lead frame away from the valve body, and eventually it comes down, etc., and that's all good. When you have your new lead frame, do the same thing, put it back in your dowel slots to actually give mine a little bit of a tap, and basically work it into the valve body. It's just a little bit of a tight fit, but basically when you get it in, obviously you these are actually the nuts, and when you go through the other side of the valve body, it's obviously up flush to the valve body. You can bolt that back in, your T27s, and this probably should be torqued up. Then again, it's just a wiring harness. It's just holding nothing, basically. So I didn't torque it up. Done a few of them, no dramas. The next step, once you've got your lead frame bolted back onto your valve body, there's a few gaskets that you need to replace, and your thermal bypass valve. So your rubber feed tubes, the factory ones, which are down in your FG, H and I spot. H on mine was actually blank, so sometimes there's 3 and then sometimes there's 4. So you want to get your rubber feed tubes. They're all different lengths, so do them one by one, but they pretty much end up being flush with the bottom of the case anyway, so even if you did put the wrong length one in there, it should be pretty obvious for you to see. Replace your feed tubes. That's all pretty straightforward. Pry them out from underneath the case, put your new ones back in. Your thermal bypass valve would be a good idea to replace. If you want to put a factory one back in, that's cool. We put a different brand in. This is basically a full bypass valve. It's just like it's basically fully open all the time, so you don't need to warm the car up to get the correct oil level for that wax thing to melt. There's a little bulletin here. If you feel like reading it, by all means read it. Part numbers on there. Google search it. You basically pull your old one out. It basically falls out anyway. When you put your new one back in, this is obviously the underside of the case, and you want your little nibbly bit pointing down to the ground. You do need to put like some grease. I just used assembly lube to basically hold it into the case, because otherwise it just tries to fall out. So this little nibbly bit will be pointing down to the valve body. Put some grease around here, stick it up there, and it should hold in. Some more gaskets here. You can take this off the bottom of the case, plastic thing, lift it off, rectangle there, rectangle on the underside, square here, square on the underside. Replace those four, put it back in. Once all those are done, that's done, those tubes are done, your bypass valve is done, you're ready to put your valve body back in. You put your valve body in, probably not a bad idea getting another person to help you, just to support it, because there's a little bit of weight. Chuck a couple of your A's in, a couple of your C's in, bring it up a little bit. Don't do it up tight at this point. At this point, when you have a few of your bolts in and it's largely pushed up against the case of the transmission, you want to be putting your new case connector lock back in. Can be a bit difficult. Put some lubricant on there, some lubricant on the case. We had to actually hit ours with a soft face hammer to get it in. The gearbox had a lot of build up and stuff on the outside of the case, which wasn't making life easy. So once you've got that in and you can push your connector lock back up, that's that part. Then you can proceed, do your valve body, bolts up. Again, I didn't torque these ones. It is what it is. I've done lots of cars, not by without torquing them, and haven't had any dramas yet. So maybe the day that I have dramas is the day that I'll start doing that. And I think that might be about it. Once you've got your valve body bolts back up, obviously new filter, new gasket, put your pan back on and fill it up with your oil, Dextron 6 in this thing, or we use a fully synthetic ATF, which does pretty much covers all transmission oils. I'll try and attach some photos to the video at the end here, just of pictures of me doing the job, and that should just about do it for this one. I hope it sort of helps you out, guys, and if it does, consider liking, consider subscribing, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.